Let's start off with you, Mohammed. Thanks a lot for joining us this evening. When the news came out regarding the ruling there by the federal court in Switzerland, one was disheartened but also shocked at how much of a human rights violation this could possibly be. And perhaps this is where the crux of the matter is, the fact that this is a human being at the center of having her body, her frame, even her identity questioned.
Yes, good evening. So just a little correction there. So I am from Mohammed Amir Mia from the South African Human Rights Commission. Tamara Matebula is from the Commission for Gender Equality, and we are teaming up together with Norton Rose Fulbright Incorporated to take on this matter. We find it shocking at the judgment that came out last week, Wednesday, that shocked our senses beyond belief, to think that they can do this to particularly African women who are being subjected to these kind of archaic practices, which has no room for in international human rights norms and standards. And therefore, we as a Human Rights Commission are very, very disappointed that the Swiss Court of Arbitration could come to a conclusion disregarding all the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, and there's a human rights resolution to that effect that says, it contravenes international norms and standards, the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, the right to sexual and reproductive health, the right to work and to the enjoyment of just and favorable conditions of work, the right to privacy, the right to freedom from torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment and harmful practices, and full respect for the dignity, bodily integrity, and bodily autonomy of a person in the form of Caster Semenya. Now, Caster Semenya is a very brave woman, and we must really take off our cap for her, because she did not go, she was not prepared to sacrifice her dignity at the expense of winning, going for gold. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we as a Human Rights Commission have taken it upon ourselves to join with the Commission of Gender Equality and say enough is enough. I think this is a practice that must be outlawed, because it's against the norms of international human rights standards. We commend the South African government for also coming to champion her rights against discriminatory regulations by the International Athletics Federation. And the South African government co-sponsored the United Nations Human Rights Council resolution, which I have referred to above, to say that, these discriminatory regulations, rules and practices that may require women and girl athletes with differences in sex development, androgen sensitivity and levels of testosterone to medically reduce their blood testosterone levels. The United Nations Human Rights Council noted that such discriminatory regulations do contravene international human rights norms and standards. And exactly what I just said earlier on. So we said, as a Human Rights Commission, we took a concerted decision that, it is unfair for Caster to go through this on her own.
Yeah.
She spent $1 million to represent herself, in the Swiss Court of Arbitration. And then what makes it even more painful is that the judgment was handed down in French, which obviously affects her rights, and then they fine her 8,000 euros. We have taken a decision. We joined with the Commission for Gender Equality, and we said to the world out there that we are not going to take it lying down. Yeah. And we commend Caster for doing what she did, and we are fully behind her, and we're going to take it beyond the levels of the South African this thing. We're going to put it on the African Union agenda. Yeah. We're going to put it in.
Well, Advocate, I want you to just stay on the line for me. I mean, we're going to go into in just a moment exactly where to from here and the necessary steps to be followed in order to seek justice. I think it's fair enough to call it justice at this stage. But I want to bring in Tamara Matebula now from the Gender Equality Commission to join us in this conversation. Tamara, very good evening to you. You're joining us on the line. I mean, here we are seeing this woman once again subjected to absolute scrutiny just for being herself, and maybe just for being a black female champion. And really the question is around exactly where does it stop? And also, what does it say about the way in which African women are portrayed and the way in which African women who actually win are portrayed?
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening to you and to your listeners out there. Yes, I think, exactly what Commissioner Amirmia is saying is that even from an African woman perspective, we see this, that there is gross violation of human rights for African women athletes. And we are unhappy in terms of how they are dealing with this case, especially how the Switzerland Federal Supreme Court has handed down this. This is gross violation of human rights. This is also gross violation of gender rights, because gender rights are human rights and human rights are gender rights. So this is gross racism, this is gross gender discrimination, and it's also coupled with a lot of gender stereotypes that our country and our countries are still faced with. So if you look at what is happening right now, we are saying that we will join hands with other Chapter 9 institutions like the South African Human Rights Commission, because we want this unfair discriminations that are subjected, or that female athletes are subjected to on a daily basis, should actually come to a stop now. And we are saying that the people should not be judged on the way or on the levels of high testosterone that are secreted by their bodies naturally. And what the court is actually saying is that the regulations themselves are actually saying that they are breaching the principles of human rights by saying that Caster Semenya should take certain medications to actually decrease the levels of secretion of the testosterone in her body. So we are broadly saying that this does not make ethical sense, and it's an incident that we need to actually deal with decisively, and we need to deal with it now, because this is the case of Caster Semenya. You will find that there are other female athletes that have been subjected to some kind of discrimination, especially if they compete, worldwide. So, we are actually putting, this campaign and this call for all these kinds of discriminations to stop. For an example, if you look at the way the speed of the African athletes, from Ethiopia, Kenya, we are talking about girls that are actually, having stamina to run, whether it's 800 meters or more. They have the stamina because the latitudes, the temperatures of our countries, agree to that, and we cannot be discriminated on the basis of the fact that we are different, or there is difference of sex development.
Well, Tamara, on that note, on that very same note that you're speaking about, you're saying that there are other athletes that have challenged such rulings. You're absolutely right, because I saw that there was even an article in about 2015 or so. The IAAF was also challenged, and this is coming in from an Indian sprinter, one such Duty Chand, who, by the way, went and approached the courts in 2015, and actually the attempt in itself was struck down in 2015 by the Court of Arbitration in Sports, and actually said that they did not have sufficient evidence to actually prove that elevated amounts of testosterone had a competitive advantage. So this happened in 2015 to an Indian sprinter, and then that sprinter actually won a case against it. So one wonders that if it happened in 2015, it went through the procedure of the court, this lady came out of it, why is it that Caster has to be subjected to the very same ruling, and then she has got a different outcome?
That's a very good question, to be precise with you. But I think this actually demonstrates that it's not only Caster that has been subjected to this kind of discrimination. A lot of women who are athletes have actually gone into these kinds of discrimination, and they haven't actually brought it up. So we are saying that this time with Caster, and if you do your own investigations, medically and otherwise, you will find that the ruling itself is unfair. And if you look at what is basically happening in terms of the outcomes of this ruling, even the evidence and the information that is brought forward is not enough to actually justify that Caster should actually be ruled in this way that she's been ruled because of the difference of sex development. So it's an unfair ruling. It's not because Caster is taking additional medication. Caster hasn't been found guilty of, when she is running, or she has a competitive advantage because she has a lot of testosterone in her body. So we are saying that we will fight this because this is a natural phenomena. It's not because she is on certain drugs that she is taking. So I think exactly like the ruling that was handed down to the Indian lady, we will actually fight it so that even in Caster's situation, we come out, with tangible information that proves beyond reasonable doubt this was an unfair ruling by the Swiss Federal Court.
Well, Advocate, where to from here? I understand that you want to petition, for example, the United Nations as well as the African Union over this very same ruling. So what are the steps to be taken from here on forth, and what are you hoping for in terms of getting that petition or galvanizing support, so as it were? What are you exactly hoping as a favorable outcome?
So this is what we're going to do. Thank you for that question, and it's a relevant question. We are going to take this matter on petition to the Portfolio Committee in Parliament, the Committee for Sports, Arts and Culture, and then we're going to ask Cabinet to put it onto the agenda, so that President Ramaphosa will then have a mandate from South Africa to put this on the African Union agenda, and then put it as an agenda that violates human rights on behalf of the African bloc. That's the first thing we're going to do. But what we are saying from this matter here, we are saying the following, that we as a Chapter 9 institution that is part of the state, we will do everything in our powers to ensure that sporting associations, federations and bodies do not violate international human rights norms and standards in the policies, practices and standards they develop. Rules and codes of practices that coerce women athletes to undergo testing, which is humiliating, demeaning, invasive and potentially harmful, falls afoul of human rights standards and infringes the rights of female athletes to bodily integrity. We are then going to do the following thereafter, is we're going to petition, we're going to call on the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Dr. Phumzile Nglamo Nuka, who was our former Deputy President, who's championing the rights of women at the United Nations, to call on the General Assembly to condemn these kind of practices itself, because it's unfair. I mean, you are punishing a woman for being a woman. It's like punishing Albert Einstein, who was a gifted genius, for being a gifted genius. I mean, that is just atrocious, to say the least. And then we want to take this matter to the Human Rights Council in Geneva as well, and we want to have the South African-sponsored United Nations resolution condemn this, but we also then want to call on a very newly established human rights body called the Center for Sports Forum, based in Geneva, to call on the IAF to have this matter investigated, because it is just not right. It cost athletes their whole career. Caster has been in this drama from the time in 2009 right till 2020. Imagine the amount of money she has lost in terms of corporate sponsors and all those kind of things. What really irks us as Chapter 9s is the fact that there was a woman called Madeleine Papi, right, who went, she's an Australian athlete that ran with Caster, and Caster beat her many times, hands down. And when Caster was out of the way, in these court cases, Madeleine Papi then got through with gold medals, and then she even got her doctorate. And later on comes and apologizes to Caster for spreading those rumors that Caster's got these abnormal hormones and all those kind of things. Now imagine what it does to a human being. It takes away like your dignity. It's like Muhammad Ali in 1971, because he refused as a conscientious objector to go to the Vietnam War. They stripped him, the Athletics Federation in the United States stripped him of his title and fined him $5,000 then itself. Now this must stop. That's the long and the short of it. So this is our strategy. We are working very closely with Norton Rose Fulbright Incorporated on this matter, and we are not going to sit and accept this judgment hands down or lying down.
Well, Advocate, we're definitely going to be hearing from the actual legal team representing Caster Semenya in just a short moment. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there for this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us, shedding some light. As you were saying, that one wonders if Caster Semenya had actually lost some of those races, would there still be the same reaction to her winnings? That's the big question of the day, isn't it? And that was Advocate Mohammed Shafi Al-Mirmia from the Human Rights Commission, as well as Tamara Matebula from the Gender Commission, or Gender Equality Commission, that is, giving us insight into that ruling of Caster Semenya. Where to from here? What is the strategy going forth? We're going to be speaking to Caster Semenya's legal team to get further insight on the matter.